The house that watched. Johanna and Lisa had been looking for a house for months when they found the perfect one, a small, charming place on the outskirts of Pretoria. It was old but well kept, priced surprisingly low. The real estate agent was hesitant when Johanna asked why it was so cheap. "It's just been on the market for a while," she said quickly. "The last owner moved overseas." They bought it, eager to settle into their new home. The first few nights were peaceful. Then Lisa began noticing small, unsettling things. She would wake up to find the hallway light on, even though she had turned it off before bed. The bathroom mirror was fogged up as if someone had taken a hot shower, except neither of them had. One evening, while unpacking boxes in the bedroom, Lisa found a small door in the closet she hadn't noticed before. It was no more than 1 meter high with a rusty latch. She called Johan over and together they pried it open. Inside was a narrow, dark passageway leading deep into the house. The air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and something else, something foul. Armed with a flashlight, Johan crawled inside. The passage was tight, the walls closing in around him. As he moved forward, he found all children's toys scattered along the way, dolls with missing limbs, a rusted tricycle. The passage led to a small windowless room. In the corner was a single dust-covered mattress, but what caught Johan's eye was a phrase carved into the wooden wall: "I watch you sleep." His stomach twisted. He backed out quickly, sealing the little door behind him. "We should leave," Lisa said, her voice shaking. Johan agreed, but they had already signed the contract, spent their savings. They decided to stay. That night, Lisa woke up gasping. She had felt something brush against her arm. Johan, half asleep, mumbled that it was probably a dream. But then, tap, tap, tap. They both heard it, a faint knocking sound coming from inside the closet. Johan grabbed a flashlight and opened the closet door. The little door was slightly ajar. And then, Lisa screamed. In the dim light, they saw fingers, small, thin fingers, curling around the door frame, pulling it open. Johan slammed the door shut and shoved the dresser in front of it. They left the house that night, never returning. The next morning, they called the agent and demanded answers. Reluctantly, she told them the truth. The last owner had not moved overseas. She had vanished without a trace. Before her, another owner had disappeared. And before that, no bodies were ever found, but there were always reports of someone or something watching from inside the walls. The house was put back on the market the following week, at an even lower price. The Forgotten Passenger. Craig had been driving taxis for almost a decade, but he had never experienced anything like what happened that night. It was a rainy, quiet Tuesday, the kind where customers were scarce. Around midnight, he parked near an old petrol station, checking his phone for new ride requests. That's when a notification popped up, a pickup request from a location deep in the rural outskirts. Craig hesitated. The fare was unusually high though, so he accepted. The pickup spot was an abandoned bus stop, just a single rusted shelter standing alone beside the wet road. A woman was already there, standing in the dim light of the taxi's headlights. She was pale, wearing a thin soaked dress, her long dark hair dripping with rain. She slid into the back seat without a word. "Where to?" Craig asked, shivering slightly. She handed him a slip of paper with an address. It was in a neighborhood he didn't recognize, but he punched it into his GPS and started driving. The woman didn't speak, she didn't fidget, she barely seemed to breathe. Every time Craig glanced at the rearview mirror, she was staring straight ahead. About 20 minutes into the drive, Craig started feeling uneasy. The roads were unfamiliar, winding into dense forest. The address seemed further than expected. He cleared his throat. "So, you live around here?" Silence. He glanced in the mirror again. The woman's reflection was gone. Craig slammed the brakes, his heart pounding. He whipped around. She was still sitting there. She had never moved. Hands shaking, Craig continued driving, desperate to reach the destination. Finally, the GPS announced, "You have arrived." Craig looked out the window. It was an empty field. There were no houses, no lights, nothing but tall, swaying grass in the wind. He turned around again. The back seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. There were no wet footprints. The seat was completely dry. Cold sweat broke over Craig's skin. His breathing was ragged. He was alone. Shaking, he looked at the slip of paper she had given him. but there was no address. Just a single sentence written in smudged ink. "Thank you for the ride. See you soon." Craig didn't drive again after that night, and every so often, when he's parked alone in the dark, he swears he still hears the faint sound of wet footsteps behind him. The man in the corner. David lived alone in a small apartment in Cape Town. He had always been a night owl, often staying up late to edit videos for work. His routine was simple: work, eat, sleep. One night, as he sat at his desk editing, he noticed something odd on the screen. In the reflection of his computer monitor, he saw a man standing in the corner of his room. David froze. His breath caught in his throat. He didn't want to turn around. His mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe a shadow, maybe his tired eyes playing tricks on him. But the figure remained, tall, still, watching. Slowly, heart pounding, he turned in his chair. Nothing was there. He exhaled shakily, laughing at himself. It had to be a trick of the light. He went back to editing. Then he noticed something even worse. The reflection was still there. The man in the corner had not disappeared. He was still watching David, only now he was closer. David shot up from his chair, spinning to face the empty room. His chest was tight, his skin crawling. He grabbed his phone, turning on the flashlight. He shone it into every corner, and his desk, inside the closet. Nothing. But when he looked back at the computer screen, the man was standing right behind him. David bolted out of his apartment, spending the night at a friend's house. The next morning he returned, cautiously stepping inside. Everything was normal. Sunlight streamed through the windows. His computer was exactly where he left it. Nervously, he sat down and turned on the screen. His reflection stared back at him. And so did the man. This time, he was sitting in David's chair, smiling. David never went back, and yet every now and then, in random places, shop windows, car mirrors, phone screens, he still sees the reflection of his old apartment, and the man is always there. The missing boy. Cara worked at a children's home, a small but busy place that took in abandoned or neglected kids. It was a hard job, but she loved it. One evening, just as she was preparing to lock up, she saw a little boy standing at the entrance. He was about 6 years old, thin, dressed in ragged t-shirts and shorts. His face was smudged with dirt. "Hey there," she said softly. "Are you lost?" The boy didn't answer. Cara knelt down. "What's your name?" Still no response. She checked around, expecting a frantic parent to appear, but the street was empty. The boy just stared at her with large, unblinking eyes. Something about him made her uneasy, but she couldn't leave him outside. She led him inside, offered him food, but he just sat silently in the common area, hands in his lap. One of the other workers, Tundi, approached. "Cara, who is that?" "I don't know," Cara whispered. "He just showed up." Tundi frowned. "We should call the police." Cara nodded, but when she turned back, the boy was gone. They searched the building, every room, every closet, even outside. He had disappeared. That night, Cara couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The security cameras would have caught something, right? She pulled up the footage from the entrance. The video showed her unlocking the door, then talking to no one. She saw herself kneeling, reaching out, but there was no boy. Just an empty space where she had imagined him standing. Cara's stomach twisted. She skipped forward in the footage, watching herself bring the invisible boy inside, sit him down, then leave. And then, her breath caught in her throat. As soon as she left, the chair moved. Not just a little, it scraped backward, as if someone had pushed it out to stand up. Then, tiny, wet footprints appeared on the floor, leading away into the halls. Cara slammed the laptop shut. The next day, she barely spoke of it. She told herself she had imagined everything, until Tundi pulled her aside, pale and shaking. "Cara," she whispered. "One of the kids, she was crying last night, said a little boy was standing in her room." Cara's blood ran cold. That afternoon, she did some digging into the home's history. She searched old records, looking for missing children who might have lived there before. And then she found it. A boy. 6 years old. He had disappeared from the home 20 years ago. They never found his body, and Cora knew, in her gut, he had never really left.